Rokt helps retailers make more of every transaction. When someone is already buying online or in-app, Rokt makes it possible to show relevant ads and offer content in that moment, like subscriptions, upgrades, or loyalty perks. So instead of interruptive advertising, customers see something more useful and more timely. For retailers, that creates more value from the transaction. For customers, it creates a better experience. That's Rokt, making every transaction more valuable. On today's flight of the Retail Pilot, my guest is James Reinhart, co-founder and CEO of Thredup, one of the largest online resale platforms for apparel, shoes, and accessories. Since starting the company in 2009, he has spent more than 15 years building a national logistics and digital infrastructure network designed to extend the life of clothing and make secondhand as easy as buying is new. Under his leadership, Thredup has helped turn resale into a structural force in fashion, partnering with brands and retailers through Resale-as-a-Service platform. James is also an outspoken advocate for innovative workplace design, including Thredup shift to a 4-day work week. Yeah, 4 days to boost satisfaction, retention, and creativity. He regularly speaks on the future of retail, circularity, and the role of technology in sustainable growth. James, welcome to the Retail Pilot.
Hey, Ken. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Good to see you and not having to chase after you at different conferences to get you to get on this podcast, but
That's
I'm
also
happy to
fun,
have
though.
you.
That's also fun. Yeah.
I mean, you're a pioneer, and I even heard someone told me, like, even behind the pioneering of this space, something about being a teacher, a professor,
Mhm.
there's a scholarly side of you that maybe is not as well known as it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. No professor, but I was a teacher. Yeah. Back in the day. That's how it all got started. And I taught history and English to eighth graders, which was both the most fun and maybe the hardest job I've ever had, trying to hold court among eighth graders.
And probably the least lucrative as well, I would guess.
Sometimes I reflect back on how I lived on $24,000 a year, Ken, these days. But, it was actually, it was a happy time for me. I had lots of free time and I met my wife, that way. She was also a teacher. So she was teaching English. And, you're in your 20s, you don't have any responsibilities. It was a great time in my life.
Well, look, it's not all about the dosh. Sometimes it's about what you do, and
You know,
I do believe money is not a motivator. I think if you love what you do, that's what motivates you. If you're making money and loving what you do, better. But you gotta
yeah.
love.
No, and I think I totally agree, and I think that's part of the through line actually of my whole career is like really, I mean, ThreadUp was not an obvious thing, right, back in 2009, right, and so I think, but I was really committed to the idea of doing something good, doing something that I thought could make a difference in people's lives, which is similar to the work that I did when I was a teacher, right, and the internships I had before that were in government, and so my whole career has been about doing stuff that does make a difference. Though you'll laugh, Kim, because when I started as a teacher, it was 2001, and it was the first kind of 4 or 5 years coming out of the dot-com boom, which was when a lot of amazing companies were being built, just 20 miles from where I was living, and I was oblivious to the idea of the tech sector. I was a kid who grew up in New Jersey. The idea of like technology, it was just not my thing, and so I sort of laugh now, being in the heart of the tech ecosystem, and how oblivious I was when I was 22 years old.
Well, that's one thing we share in common. I went through my retail life, and I could care less about technology. In fact, talk about a necessary evil. For me to
Yeah.
go to a tech meeting, there had to be no fork available for me to put in my eye, so I would go to a tech meeting. I was useless, but I would just go there and have to tell somebody to do something, and then it was
Yeah.
supposed to happen. But
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
about
I
11
know.
years ago, I took the plunge, and I've been kinda nerding out since.
Yeah, no, it's similar. Like the fact that people want my opinion on AI, makes me laugh given I was a philosophy and history major in college. But sure, I can pontificate on AI if you want. So, yeah.
So when you made the leap from teaching, what was the
Yep.
problem or what was the opportunity that you identified
Yeah.
that was your calling to thread up?
Yeah, so I was a teacher and then I was helping build charter schools. So I was really interested in charter school movement, school choice, just, helping provide really disadvantaged low income families, with better schools. I then took that and I went to, I did a joint degree program in business and public policy. So I was very focused on what were changes at the policy level that needed to be done to improve, education systems. So that's a long way of saying is that I didn't have any money, Ken, when I was in business school, right? I was really pretty broke, and I went to sell my clothes. So this is fall of 2008. I went to sell my clothes at a local consignment store on Mass Ave in Cambridge, like literally a bag of clothes. J.Crew cashmere sweater, Brooks Brothers coat, total, business school nerd. And they didn't take them. They're like, this is not like we only do luxury or we don't do men's, right? Those are like the common refrains. And in my mind, I was like, but this stuff has value. I can't believe this cashmere sweater is worth zero. And so that actually was the impetus for starting the business. I thought, oh, this is sort of a market problem, in the way that secondhand clothing is valued. And that began the journey that has taken me to where I am today. So it was very much a problem of, I just felt like the secondhand market was trapped in the Stone Ages. So at that point you could shop at Goodwill or some vintage stores, or it was eBay and Craigslist. That was kind of it. And, eBay at that point was 16, 17 years old, right? And it was still not really innovating. And so I just saw an opportunity to both solve my own personal problem. And then I think what I learned over the next couple of years was that this was a bigger market than even I anticipated. And so yeah, that's how we got started.
I mean, okay, so here's a smart guy looking for some extra cash, trying to sell his clothing, realizes there's no market for it. He says, "I'm gonna create this market and eventually take a company public," which I'm sure you weren't thinking about at the time, but
No,
who
no.
the hell is investing in, like, in you
Yeah.
when where's your experience for running a retail company or a technology company, a
Yeah.
secondhand company? You're a teacher.
Yeah. Well, lots of people said no. So, but the you don't actually need, you only need one person to say yes. Right. And so if I kind of take you back there, a couple of things were interesting. One was um, that the iPhone had just been invented. Right. It was only a couple of years old. So we had a whole bunch of new consumer experiences, Uber, Airbnb, people were listening on Spotify. Right. So you had this sort of like general zeitgeist of like new consumer modalities. And so what I was pitching is that, this was an industry about to transform. And while I was not like a classic, technology entrepreneur, my co-founder, my co-founders were, right? So my co-founder was who became the CTO, worked at Microsoft. He was very talented engineer. I mean, I think one of the best engineers certainly that I've ever met. And so I think, Ken, there was the balance of, we've got James like with like vision and sort of understanding like where the consumer might be going. And we've got Chris, my co-founder, who was technology operator, and then our other co-founder, Oliver, who was sort of a designer, also a computer science major. So I think it was really the three of us that were a winning team. But I will tell you that it was such a struggle to raise money in Boston at the time, because Boston, right, was a legacy. It was hardware. It was a lot of biotech. It was not a hotbed of consumer investing, and so it was a huge grind. And it wasn't actually until we came out to Silicon Valley where we really the idea resonated. And but yeah, it was hard for sure. We ran the company. This is something like inside lore. The first entire year, we ran the company on $70,000.
Wow.
So like
I bet
all the
you were
quote
missing
unquote
that teacher
salaries. Yeah.
teacher salary at that point.
So yeah, I was like in a mountain of debt, and yeah, there was like seven of us, I think, maybe employed at the company.
And this is
Yeah.
2009-ish?
This is 2009 into 2010. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
We'd
just
raised
passed
like
that financial crisis that we had 2008,
correct.
9, that whole blow up, which was not a fun time as I recall.
No. No, and, like, look, there's, like, these moments in your life. I mean, I had a job at, a good job at Parthenon Consulting, which was, like, a good boutique consulting firm in Boston, and they pulled my offer, as, many companies were sort of pulling offers. And I look back on that as like, had they been like, "Oh no, come James," it was more money than I'd ever made in my life times two. And so I often think about, would ThreadUp have existed if Parthenon was had not pulled that offer and wooed me the way that they were wooing people, years prior. So you never know.
Shit happens for a reason. Hey,
Yeah,
so
totally.
what was your original pitch for ThreadUp? Do you remember the original your elevator pitch? What
Oh,
was it?
sure. It was all about, so we were when we launched, it was the Netflix of shirts. So it was all about, it was a terrible business, honestly, Ken, right? It was like men's shirts. You didn't even get to see pictures of the shirt. I mean, it was really a bad business. But the insight was that it was clearly a problem that I understood, right? Around kind of, the fact that people outwear their clothes. We just didn't really nail like what the product experience would be. But look, we launched. Our launch was covered in the New York Times on the Bits blog. You can go find it, like Netflix of Shirts, 2009. Jenna Wortham, who's now like a big time author at the Times, she covered it, and we got some momentum.
So when you think about ThreadUp now, what are the metrics or signals you personally pay the most attention to beyond the headline revenue number? And just for our
Yeah.
listeners, your company is approaching 400 million in annual revenue. Is that
Hmm.
that correct?
Yep.
Just to set
Yep.
some context, and also public company, which we'll
Yep.
have to discuss as well. Like, what were you
Yep.
thinking? But I want to hear about that later. But what are the key metrics or signals that you're looking for that tell you that the needle is moving in the right direction?
Yeah, so look, as a public company, when you go public, you got to pick the few metrics that you want to like, reliably, report every quarter. So we picked ones that actually, like, I do think they ultimately drive, what we think about in the business, which is I spend a lot of time looking at margins, right? Now we only report gross margins, but I personally am always looking like one layer below, right? Like how is the P&L flowing through contribution margins, right? And then marketing paybacks, right? So I'm always looking at LTV to CAC ratios. We talk a lot about that primarily because I think if you're watching CACs, I think it gives you an indication of like, okay, how is the marketing resonating? Does the product work, right? Are people converting? I think CAC isn't just like how much money can you spend on Meta, right? It's a pretty good proxy of like whether you've built something people care about, and how that scales. And then I think LTV, right, to make sure you're thinking about, are you driving real recurring revenue? And so I spend a lot of time looking at cohort data, right? How are those LTVs changing over time? How are they changing by channel? So I am pretty in the weeds on that stuff. The other piece is I'm really spending a lot of time looking at the efficiency of our distribution centers. How fast are we turning product? How fast are we able to put product online? So I spend a lot of time looking at units per hour throughput, right? Yield on the bags that we're getting. I think although I'm not a retail guy, I am a very like data driven. I kind of obsess over knowing all the numbers. And so those are like a handful of the ones that I'm paying a lot of attention to. I'm not as like deep in the merchandising and product piece of just, what sort of apparel, right, is trending. And I think what might not be obvious to some of your readers is that or our listeners, we really think about like the um uh like operations logistics part of the business as the most important, right? Because there's micro trends, there's macro trends, they're always changing. Our job is to source the best apparel and put it online at an attractive price, not necessarily to decide what's cool. And I think in the early days, we spent more time trying to figure out like, oh, what's cool, right? Like, is Ken going to think this is cool versus like you put great product online from brands and and people buy it.
You just reported quarterly results, and this
Mhm.
this is where we're today, June 9th or June 8th,
Yep.
talking. So you just recently reported quarterly results, and yet a 25% increase in year-over-year buyers, active
Yep.
buyers. I
Yep.
mean, that seems to be a really important measurement and great progress that you're making on your path to profitability, which is another
Yep.
goal for this
Yep.
year. How do you balance growth versus the push towards sustainable profitability in the current market?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really so I think years ago, it was more of a trade-off, right? I mean, I think we were thinking about how much capital to deploy in growth initiatives, whether that's marketing or investments in operations, and what that trade-off was on the profitability piece. Now, actually, it's like the contribution margins are so good that honestly, the more we grow, the more profits we generate, right? I think the marketplace that we've built now has this natural flywheel built in. So now it's really a question of, how do we drive growth? And I think what we've been really committed to, certainly for street investors, is we want to basically grow as fast as possible while driving, consistent margin expansion. So last year the business grew 20%. We put up 4.5 points of EBITDA. This year, we've basically said, we're going to grow, high teens, and we're going to put up, 600 bips of, or 150 bips of expansion and, 6 points of EBITDA. And so our strategy has been methodical bottom line leverage, but then taking anything incremental to that and flowing it back into the growth engine. And so, one of the things as a public company for us is just making sure investors really understand what our strategy is, and that's the strategy, is very disciplined bottom line growth, but everything else is going back into the top line.
Looking at your site, I was kind of surprised to see there was nothing for me to buy. I mean, I guess I could buy something for my wife or for my kids, but no
Yeah.
men's. Like,
No men's.
no,
Yeah.
and by the
Yeah.
way, good for you because like we could be the worst types of customers there are.
Yes. You are. We are. Yes. I mean, the problem, we started, as I joked earlier, like, we started with men's. It's not a good business. I get asked every month at our company all hands, when's men's coming? And, I get asked by investor. Everyone wants to know why men's. I mean, primarily because there's a lot of men, right, that are asking these questions. And then when you explain it, it becomes obvious. And so I will explain it again, right? Which is, men only wear four colors: blue, black, brown, gray, right?
And
So
then
the
blue
idea of
again. It's
yeah,
true though. You know, it's interesting if you go through a guy's closet, 75% of his shirts are blue or white. I mean,
yeah,
that's the story. We're like, this is a
no,
very
exactly,
lean
and
group.
and the incentive to get rid of one for another, like, it just, it doesn't quite work. The other
Makes
is that
sense.
we tend to wear our stuff out more, right? So by the time, like, it could enter the resale market, nobody
Yes.
wants your pit stain shirt, Ken. Nobody wants mine, either, right? Like, it's just the reality is, like, men, we hold on to this stuff. And so those are like the two primary reasons. And then the third is just the men's market, as you know, is just smaller, right?
It's
Women
tougher.
buy a
Yeah, it
lot
is.
more stuff. And so,
Well, good. I agree. But stay away from the guys. We're just bad news. When you talk about resale taking direct market share from traditional retail, which
yeah.
obviously it does, where do you think ThreadUp share is coming most from today? Fast fashion, premium brands, or something else?
I mean, I think it's generally taking share from the mall brands, right? I think department stores, malls, although malls are back, right?
They're
As we
hot. They're back.
they're
They're
hot,
definitely
right?
back.
They were way down, so hot is a relative term, right? But yeah, I think that that's generally where it's taking share. I don't think it's really taking share from fast fashion. I mean, I'd like to believe that we're, like, incrementally helping people, not shop there, but fast fashion companies are great at making cheap stuff that people want to buy and make disposable. So, but yeah, I think it's generally those types of brands.
When the latest data that I've read was that the secondhand global market is just about 400 billion in sales, roughly
Yeah,
10% of all apparel spend.
yeah.
Where do you see the next big unlock for ThreadUp within that? New geographies, categories, services. We know it's not men's
Yeah. Yeah.
for now.
Yeah, we know it's not men's for sure. Yeah, and, like, one note on that is, like, a lot of these, metrics, either globally or in the US, they're GMV based, right? And, you and I both know you don't pay your bills with GMV, right? And so, I always, like, educate people of, like, think about, what's ultimately, like, flowing through, the
Yep.
P&L, right? And so, but in the US, it's probably 75, I think the estimate's like 75 or 80 billion by the end of the decade. Um, for us, we're really focused on just dominating supply. And so, everything that we have been doing is making ThreadUp the default place for you to sell. And so, way back in the beginning of ThreadUp's founding, I was really focused on convenience. How do you just make it as easy as possible for people to get rid of the things that they're no longer wearing? And so everything you're going to see from us going forward is really focusing on making it as easy as possible to sell. Because I'm a big believer, if you dominate the supply chain, you can, you're going to be able to attract buyers, right? All marketplaces are supply constrained as they scale. And, the key to Airbnb's growth is great new places for people to stay, right? The open table resi wars, right? We're all about which restaurant, is going to be on which platform. And so, Spotify, right? The whole thing is all about the supply of high quality music. And so for us, it's about the clothing. And to give you like a sense, we started with our basic kit, right? Clean out kit. We then launched, a lot of people were like, oh, can I use your platform to donate clothing? Like, I don't really want to sell it. I just want to make sure that it doesn't end up in a landfill. We launched donation. And then last year we launched premium. So a more elevated experience. You as the seller get more control. That has gone incredibly well. And then just in the last few months, we launched direct listings, which is our peer-to-peer service, which allows you to just list, one or two items. And so you're starting to see a track record of us trying to build products that any seller can use.
So realistically, to summarize, ThreadUp covers the entire resale space
Yep.
from direct to consumer, from
Yep.
B2B. You can work with brands and put brands, you can set up their ability to resell their
Yep.
product.
Yep.
And now you're also going peer to peer, which is
Yep.
typically known as Poshmark or Depop's market. And that
Sure.
was
Yep.
their big space. So you're
Yep.
covering the ecosystem.
Yes, and I think what I would like, we're covering the ecosystem, and I would emphasize what we're trying to do is not just create Me Too type products. Like, we're really trying to think about where competitive advantage can come in these slices of the industry. And so, for our peer-to-peer product direct listings, it's really important that like we're focused on casual sellers. We're not, this isn't necessarily where we want all the small businesses. We know that that's a part of what Poshmark and others are trying to do. And then importantly, we offer returns, right? Because we have this huge logistics infrastructure, we can provide a lot more trust and safety for the buyer, right? Because ThreadUp stands behind the product. And for the seller, once that sale is complete, they don't want it back, right? Like casual sellers, they're not logistics companies. It's like, once it's out of my house, like, I'm sorry if it doesn't fit for you, buyer, but like, that's not my problem. And so we really see our operations advantages or operations infrastructure creating real advantage in the peer-to-peer market, which I think sometimes people don't quite appreciate when they're like, oh, ThreadUp just now has this other thing. It's like, it's not just the other thing, it's how that product is built, right, for that customer. And same thing in Resale-as-a-Service with brands. Our offering is free and it's fully vertically integrated. We can do take back for you. We can do cleaning and repair. Like, we can do it all on a vertically integrated basis, which I think others, can't do. And so
So who
again, it's not
so
it's not
James, to
just
that
a
end
competitive. Yeah.
who are some of the brands that you're working with today that we would know?
I mean, we just launched with Steve Madden. We launched with Cotopaxi a few months ago. J.Crew, Athleta. So, big consumer brands. And, we've got a bunch of other brands that we're sort of working with as well. And so, yeah. And I think you're going to start to see, Ken, some consolidation in this space because I think brands are looking for scalable solutions and they want to pay less. And that's what we do.
So if I walk into a J.Crew store today and I ask for a ThreadUp kit, or what would I
Yep.
what's the right
Yeah.
question to ask for to get that bag and get started?
Yeah, it depends on the brand. So, like at Athleta, for example, they tend to be right on the checkout till. It just says Athleta times ThreadUp, and there's a whole little display. Most of the J. Crew stores, the bigger ones, they're on the counter. The smaller J. Crew stores, sometimes you have to ask an associate. So there's a little bit of a depends on how the store is set up. But yeah, any of those stores, have clean out kits in stock. You can ask for them, or they're there in the display. And we're working actually quite a bit with our retail partners, because it's hard to put that on the store GM, right, or the manager of like, how do I manage, right? So
Wait,
making it
they're like, wait. I get BOPIS and now I gotta ship from store and now wait, I'm
totally.
taking back people's laundry? Come on!
Exactly. Where do I put all this stuff, right? So we
God.
get it, right? And so but I think brands have really, they love the foot traffic and the engagement, because remember that when a customer works with one of our brand partners, the way it works, let's say take J.Crew, you get a J.Crew clean out kit, you put all your stuff in there, not just J.Crew. You put anything, right? Anything that you have in that bag, we process it, and then all the earnings accrue to you as a J.Crew gift card. And to me, like,
That's
that's a
cool.
big win for the brand. Yeah.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
so good. I mean, that's just a great way to create it's a flywheel.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, and brands,
Amazing.
like, they wanna help their customer, be responsible, keep stuff out of landfills, and, if they can help encourage them to buy something then new in store, I think that's great.
Well, the other player in that space is Archive, but they're very
Yeah.
focused specifically on the B2B aspect. They're not, focused on the peer selling and certainly not on the consignment piece, which is what
Yes.
you own in a big way.
Yeah, and it's Archive, it's Trove,
So,
there's a
yeah.
company called Treat, right, which does peer-to-peer. Like, these are all, like, good companies, but they're startups, right? And so they're trying to sort of find their way into a business model that makes, I think, good sense. And, we see them as, like, really great collaborators over time.
So when I think about what you do, and from what I've read about what you do, I get like an amazing aesthetic headache because I think about the single SKU challenge that you have.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
to us a little bit about what that really means, what the hell that looks like, and how big a place do you have to manage to deal with
Yeah.
these returns or these exchanges or this
Yeah.
business?
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me, 15 years ago, you're gonna run, distribution centers all over the country and process, tens of millions of pieces of clothing, every year, I would have laughed at you. But but yeah, I mean, the way it looks, so any given day, we're probably processing a couple 100,000 pieces of clothing. We take over 1 million photos, a day across like those products, including video. Um, and then we're gonna sell, I don't know, 25-ish million items this year, all unique across 35,000 brands, 100 categories. So yeah, it's a big operation, and as you know, right, clothing doesn't have barcodes on it. So it's not like you have it in some Dewey Decimal system or some, put away system. You are retrieving these things from dynamic storage. Um, but look, everything that we have built, I think, and I think this is why we've been able to be successful, is been bespoke, right, for this particularly unique challenge. And just like as a funny example, if you go to our distribution centers, we've got carousels and conveyors. It's like Willy Wonka. If Willy Wonka had a used clothing operation, this is kind of what it would look like. And or somebody described me as Monsters Inc. But everything that we do, like the systems and software out there, hardware it's not built for what we want, right? So like we had to design our own motors, right, to run the carousels, given kind of the way, the speed and the weight. We had to design our own hangers, because if you want to run a garment on hanger facility at a certain speed, the garments will fly right off as they turn the corner. And so you had to design a different type of hanger, right, that could clip on. And so those are two examples of like 1,000 little things, that we've had to do to make this operation generate 80% gross margins, mid 40s contribution margins, and really best in class.
How many warehouses do you manage?
So now we have four. So we have one in Pennsylvania, one in Arizona, one in Atlanta, and one in Dallas. Um, the one in Atlanta holds about 3.5 million pieces of clothing at any one time, unique. And then the one in Dallas we're building will hold 10 million. And so across, think about like 4 football fields, 4 stories high is what that facility will ultimately look like. And that facility 10 million items, we estimate can do, I don't know, between 6 and 700 million, just out of that box. So
And I thought building these data centers was like a tough task. I can't even imagine this. So,
data centers are hard too. Data centers are hard too, but yeah, these are pretty impressive facilities, and look,
so
Ken, I think it's why nobody's competed with us, and really since we raised money almost 10 years ago, Goldman Sachs, kind of pre-IPO ish type round, put in $75 million. There's been nobody really in our space since.
well, I
Um,
mean, you're the one-way version of Rent the Runway. I mean, they've got a mega
yeah,
location
yeah,
and huge
yeah.
dry cleaning, but they get it back.
They get it back, and it's funny. Like we don't clean, right? Because the first thing people do when you survey customers about shopping secondhand is they're like, "Oh, the first thing I do is I wash it." So the sustainability part of our team is like, well, let's not wash things twice. Like it's destructive, it ruins garments, everything. And so yeah, the Rent the Runway team has a different problem.
So I gotta ask one nerdy question. So if a
Yeah.
customer buys an outfit and they buy 3 pieces,
Yeah.
potentially could it come to them in 3 boxes from 3 different warehouses?
No, we consolidate everything actually. So we've built an internal consolidation trucking system, which we call ThreadX, not FedEx. And ThreadX moves items, to and from those facilities. And so, Dallas and Atlanta are basically a day apart. And so if you shop out of one of those facilities, if you shop out of both, it adds an extra day on consolidation. But we use those as like discrete outbound hubs. Saves on shipping, logistics, better customer experience.
Wow, better you than
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So with this big push in AI, where is AI most noticeable from a customer point of view today?
Well, I would actually turn the question a little bit on its head, which is like the whole point is that they don't notice it. It's just like
Okay.
magic, right, on the front end. But what I would tell you is like where the magic is, I think now. And I was actually talking to, I was at an investor conference last week, and we had a investor come in, and she said, I shopped at ThreadUp like 10 years ago. She's like, and I just like started shopping it again, and I wanted to come to this meeting to tell you how amazing the experience is now relative to where it was, many years ago. And she's like, everything is just better. And so the answer to the AI question now is everything on the back end, our entire search, discovery, personalization is all built on a fully new back end system, right? Of using AI sort of attribution across the network. And so now as a customer, you just can find what you want so much easier, right? From the way search works to the way we do similar items. You can take a picture of an item. You can ingest your Pinterest board. I actually think this is like one of the best things we've done. We basically now you can link a woman can link her Pinterest board, and we will just in the background pull up whatever she has linked us to, and we will use our AI tools to interpret her style. And then you can basically shop on your Pinterest board, sort of like curation. And it's crazy kind of stuff like my daughter has used it, and she just put in all of like these movie posts. She's pinned all these movie posters, and it like can like read all of her movie posters and then interpret her personal style. And like it's like the coolest thrift shop she could ever want to shop at, right? It's like, and so I think we're using tools that work in the background, but that make the front end experience feel like magic.
But the magic is being put towards search, discovery, outfit
Yeah,
creation,
correct.
maybe trend analysis, things that a younger customer would say, "I wanna look like or I wanna go to the Barbie party. What do I
Yep.
wear?"
Yeah, no, you can put in a thread up right now, Barbie core, right? Or, Long Island bar mitzvah or Nantucket wedding, or like you can put all these things in and then iterate, right, to find something that looks great on you.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor, Leap, the Resale-as-a-Service platform that lets modern brands launch and scale brick and mortar with far less cost, risk, and complexity. I know many of my listeners are thinking about or already in the process of opening retail locations, but the lease, build out, and hiring feel impossible. Leap handles everything from site selection and real estate to design, build out, staffing, and daily operations across 110 plus locations for over 55 brands in 13 U.S. markets. Brands like Bombas, Faraday, Frankie's Bikinis, and Ring Concierge have used Leap to run their retail, and with operational heavy lifting off their plate, they open faster, perform stronger, and scale further. If you're ready to go physical, visit leapinc.com to schedule a call and explore what a Leap partnership could look like for your brand. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about marketing, how you get the
Yeah.
word out there, where the brand shows up. If you think about social media, which I think for your customer would probably be pretty important when you get into
Yeah.
Gen Z, where do you see the biggest lift coming out of social media? What's working for the brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do all the normal stuff, right? I mean, we've got, social media channels going across TikTok, Instagram, and so forth. I think what we're starting to figure out is how do you get the right level of creator and influencer, right? To tell the brand story, not just from hey, I bought this on ThreadUp or like doing unboxing videos, right? Which, been around for a long time. Um, but what we're really focused on is how can you follow a creator or an influencer and their certain style aesthetic that then can be mimicked on ThreadUp. And so I'm a big believer that creators, in order to sustain this like broader creator economy, like are always going to need, fresh ways to be influential. And one way that you can do that is to help people follow your style. And so we're working with, lots of creators who can then make effectively like thrift shops, right, of their own curation. But what's cool about it, Ken, is like it's not like they have to go in and tag every item. If you kind of use the Pinterest, board example, they can actually pull together their aesthetic and their style, and then we can interpret that, on behalf of their followers. And I see this amazing like virtuous cycle for folks being able to, sell stuff out of an affiliate linked type of store, right? For which we are constantly refreshing that store, with 100,000 new items every day. So that's what we're trying to kind of break free a little bit of just the classic, social media marketing piece. So that's one thing. And then the other is like we're really focusing more now on how to break through with events, and sort of getting people out of their home. I mean, I think there's a generation of kids who maybe want to put down the phone, if you kind of believe what you're reading now.
If you
And
believe.
if you believe, right? Or at least they want to tell us they're putting down the phone. But we just did this pop up last weekend. So for kind of first weekend of June, in Soho, it was a wedding dress pop up, and there were like lines, 2 blocks long, all day. I mean, it was like an incredible event, and so we're trying to kind of do a little bit of both. But that event, we used influencers and creators, right, to drive kind of awareness.
That's awesome. Is there an influencer team or company that you work with, micro influencers or someone you want to plug just for others who are looking
I
to.
don't know, unfortunately, who we're working with right now, so I
And
can't
how
help
about
you.
you mentioned physical retail, which
Yeah,
certainly an opportunity, also not so easy and probably
yeah,
difficult to replenish in your case. But
yeah.
is physical retail, is this something that you're thinking more about now and looking at different locations, certainly for brand awareness purposes, if nothing else?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, rising up the level of, like, consideration. I don't think we're just there yet, probably in the next couple of years, but I do agree that, having a physical presence, especially as, like, in a world where you wanna process bags and returns. So I've been thinking a lot just personally about what is, like, a next generation thrift store look like. Most thrift stores today look very much like they looked 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Nothing has changed. It's like I
Nothing has
just think
changed. It's
about Buffalo Exchange.
totally just racks of stuff, right? So I've been thinking a lot around what that looks like, and can we innovate there, and like what that store might look like. But nothing. But I'm more interested in it now than I've been in a long time.
It's funny, you think about a pop-up physical retail, you think about the potential of someone coming in with a bag of clothing and
Yep.
almost getting hit with a gift card on the spot. They're
Yep.
converting that right into product that's there.
Totally. And I do think like so much. There's that, and then just the experience. I mean, every time we take people through our distribution centers in Atlanta, they're like kids in a candy store. They're like, "That's so cool. That's so cool. This is so cool." And I think a lot about how do you bring that magic, more front and center for the consumer. And so, what does it look like to build, mini hubs and that are experiential and fun? And so we'll see.
I have 3 kids. I have a 21-year-old, I have a 24-year-old, and I have a 33-year-old. And
Okay,
they all love thrifting. They love hitting
they
the
do.
store.
I
You
know.
know, the
My daughter. I
unpredictability.
know. Well, and look, we live in the Bay Area, I live in Oakland. Crossroads is very popular here. It's a great store. And my daughter loves going down there. I'm like, we get 40% off if you shop on Thredup. She's like, yeah, whatever, dad. Right. So, I'm like, we get the company, you get the corporate discount. She's like, yeah. But I appreciate that people want to shop. And even I'm finding myself more and more now, like I just going in and everything in our lives has become so digital. There actually is a little bit something nice about going in and touching stuff.
Well, it's fun. It's like it's a disorganized version of Costco. You're excited to go. You know you're gonna come out with a load of shit. You have no idea what it's gonna be. Well, not true. There's like 3 things you go to Costco for, and there are 30 things you leave with.
Oh,
When you go
totally.
thrifting, you know you're gonna come away with some good stuff. You just don't know
I
what it
mean,
is.
it's very rare. You're so right. It's very rare that someone leaves a thrift store empty-handed. It happens, but it's rare, right? And, I can't remember the last time I walked out of Costco without anything, So, yeah.
All right, gotta ask you about the 4-day work week. This is
Sure.
your brainchild? I mean, came out of COVID. We've seen
Yeah.
movement everywhere. It's happening even to some degree in the UK. But
Yeah.
talk about what it was that really got you to say, "We're gonna have a 4-day work week."
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that sometimes gets lost in the 4-day workweek conversation is that at ThreadUp, like we've been from the very beginning kind of innovating on this notion of work-life integration. And so from the beginning of the company's life, we had a very generous sabbatical policy. So if you when you work at ThreadUp for 3 years, you earn into a 2-month sabbatical, right? Most companies they wait 10 years, right? And so part of that was I wanted to build longevity and richness into the experience. I think employees that, are, live our values and they're out there like exploring the world and learning, like infinite learning is a big part of our thing. So sabbaticals was like the first part of this. The next is we have this concept called maker days, which now I think lots of people have like adopted this term. But in 2011, this was more novel and the idea of maker days was we're going to have some days that have meetings, but we're also going to really protect creative and maker time. And so for a long time in a traditional 5-day work week, Tuesdays and Thursdays were maker days. So you could not schedule any meetings on those days. They were designed for like work and problem solving. And I was a big believer that we just spent too much time talking and collaborating and wasting time and not enough time like thinking and solving the hardest problems of the day. So we had that for many years. And then during the pandemic, obviously there was some change to, work from home and so forth. We had some work from home kind of maker day like schedules before the pandemic. And so you could work from home on maker days or you could come to the office. Some people came, some people didn't. And then we switched to a 4-day work week during the pandemic, primarily for we started with the idea of like we knew we needed less people, right? But instead of doing a big round of layoffs, we basically had everyone go down to 4 days and we did a pay cut. We did an across the board pay cut for about 9 months there. But then nothing changed, Ken. The company still did all the work and operated at an exceptionally high level on these 4 days. So I thought, well, shit, can we like make this like the default experience when everybody comes back to the office? And so we switched to I was like, hey, let's try a 4-day work week. And I was very emphatic. This is an experiment. This is an experiment. Every 6 months, this is an experiment. This is an experiment. Um, and the 4-day work week has worked, very well for us. But it's on this continuum of work life and employee engagement and happiness. And I'm just a big believer that if you have happy employees who are rested and feel well taken care of, they produce superior results over time. That the most important thing that any company needs is exceptional people. And so I'd rather have an extraordinary person 4 days of work than an above average person 5 days work, right?
Well,
Like we've all worked with those people, right? We know the 10x employees, the more of those people the company has, the better it performs.
was there a moment where you said this is working and it's no longer an experiment, and did the crowd go crazy?
I don't actually think I've ever said it's no longer an experiment, but I think, it's like one of those, like, I feel like it's become so normed that it'd be hard, although not impossible, frankly. Like if I felt like, hey, we were really not getting the work done, then I would probably go back. But I think people generally like really appreciate it about the culture. And I think it's allowed us to have extraordinary levels of engagement and retention. I mean, we've not lost a single person. Literally, we've not lost a single person uh that we would have we've never lost anybody we wanted to keep, right? And I think that's like a pretty impressive stat.
You can also argue too that if companies are adopting half the amount of AI that they say they're adopting, and
Yep.
the
Yep.
associates are becoming that much more efficient, you know, working 4 days is real. You should be getting 5 days worth of work in pretty easily.
Yeah, and that, and like I don't know what your experience is, but as I've like become, more AI native from like my applications and how I work, it's more intense. And like I was on a plane from Salt Lake City to Oakland, this is 2 or 3 weeks ago now. Um, and I was on a Delta flight with their new Starlink, like fast Wi-Fi. And I had like 4 or 5 agents working in Claude, co-work while I was on the plane. And I was just switching as the agents were finishing projects. And Ken, it was like doing like wind sprints, right? Like there was like not enough rest. And I just found myself at the end of that 2-hour flight, I had done probably 25 hours of CEO work and I was exhausted. And so I've been thinking a lot around what is it the world of work going to look like in these intervals of intensity. And so I think maybe we're ahead of our time with 4-day work week.
As a leader, how are you getting teams, your people, to adopt AI? From whether it's Claude or
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I mean, what is it that you're looking for? I mean, I'm reading about some companies that are doing reviews based on the amount of AI usage or tokens that
Yeah.
people are using. But
Yeah.
how are
Yeah.
you making sure that your team is digging in and using it appropriately?
To me, it's all about the culture that you said at the top. So it's like I'm using it, I'm talking about it, my executive team, we're using it, talking about it. I think it is clearly like something that needs to be talked about every day, every week, every month, almost to the point where like I think I'm even tired of talking about it, right? And not even just at work, but like, every casual conversation it feels like you have these days. If the conversation is more than 30 minutes, AI comes up, right? I mean, it's just shocking. And so I think it's where I've made the change probably in the last few weeks is I've just emphasized to people that um, it needs to move from AI's optimizing my workflow to like it's changing the way I work and what we do. And I've just been very clear that like it needs to change what you do, how you spend your time, not just that like you're asking questions at ChatGPT. Like we're past that. That was very 2025. It's
Right.
2026
So
now, right? We
last
got to
year.
change. It's so we got to change workflows. And look, the other honest thing I've said to people is that, and I think people have appreciated the candor, which is I said to them like, look, I'm not going to lie to you. You do have to spend some time in your free time getting up the curve. Like if you expect the company that you do all your job and then we just give you days and days and days every week to figure this out on your own, I was like, I'd just be lying to you. Like the
So,
reality is you have a natural curiosity to work on it nights and weekends and figure stuff out. It just is.
so on the
So
last question on the home, the work front, AI literacy, when teams are interviewing prospects,
yeah.
candidates, what's the question around, like, what are you digging into to see if that person, that candidate is AI literate?
Yeah, I mean, I think look, it's very easy for us now, and it depends on the role, right? But in sort of engineering product design, to just be like, well, show us what you've been working on, and like what your agents are doing, and how you like what's your setup, and like we ask people to show us, and for the same reason that like back
Do you wait, wait,
10
wait,
years.
hold on, hold on.
Yeah.
Do you start the interview there? Just if they don't show, you say, "I think we're done." I mean, it could save you a lot of time. I mean, you're
Yeah.
about saving time, so I'd ask that
Yeah.
question up front.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we definitely in the screening process try and make sure that like we don't we but yeah, we do start early, with that. But years ago, I used to like when we'd be hiring people for analysts or in finance roles. I would be like, bring up like something in Excel, right, and show me like what you've built and how you've manipulated it. And I'm always looking for like fluency in the tools as much as like what the tool is.
Hmm.
In fact, even like if you just watch somebody who's an analyst, just even how they navigate their keyboard, you can see how sharp they are. Like people who are really sharp, like they're just like they're working at a different rate. And so anyway, we try and do all that. The other thing is I was talking to a product manager who used to work at ThreadUp and then like went to business school and was like thinking about what's next. And I said to her, I said, in a few years, you'll be hired for you and your team of agents. She's like, really? I'm like, yep. I was like, so be prepared to bring a team with you to your interview. And she's just laughed. But I think that that's true, right? I think we'll be hiring engineers with a whole team of agents. And I think it's the same across product and design.
Before we get into rapid fire, I got to ask you one question. Why would a company your size go public?
I mean, you go public for two reasons, right? Like one, to raise money, right? And it was a very good time to raise money when we went public, and I think people always forget that they're capital raising events. And so it was a very lucrative way for us to raise, capital. And the second is I do think like, when you think about driving, if you're a startup and you've taken money from investors, and you owe them a return. And I always took like that seriously, that like to drive liquidity. And I thought the best opportunity to create good financial outcomes for all the employees who worked at ThreadUp for a long time and investors, was to take the company public at a time when it was a wonderful time to go public, right? Like that period was, the markets were frothy, right? And people had appetite. And I think to me, like it's like one of the smartest things I've ever done, right? Doesn't mean that it's hard, that it hasn't been hard. But if you think about it from a capital raising and rewarding all the people who put money in over all those years, um, I think it was smart. So,
Well, listen, you
and
must
look,
be
I'd say
doing
the other out thing is like we've become such a better company, Ken, from a discipline and like, we just like it is such a well-run business now from how well can we predict the future, right? What are the metrics that matter? I think startups and private companies don't quite appreciate the rigor of what it means to be a public company and just how much sharper everything about your business becomes.
I mean, you have stellar board members like Noam Paransky
Yeah.
to outspoken, top-selling retail analysts like Oliver Chen. And I don't know, frankly, how you can get Oliver into ThreadUp because he's such a fashion victim. I'm sorry, Oliver, if you're listening to this, you can yell at me later. But I mean, the guy, like someone else talked to James. I'm meeting with Chanel. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
he's got good
exactly. No,
coverage.
I was with Oliver last week. I mean, look, to Oliver's credit, I think he prides himself on really understanding like where the world is going. And I think he just, even though he doesn't shop, particularly the brands that necessarily we buy, he understands how the retail landscape is transforming. And so he and I have known each other a long time. They just picked up coverage, like a couple months ago.
I
And
saw that. I'm sorry I
it's
missed you at
great.
his conference. I know he had his
Yeah.
conference his annual event last week. He's great.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorites out there. And I
Yeah,
mean,
no, he's
in
he's
fairness, I mean, I don't even think he's buying the brands you sell full price. So anyway,
yeah.
just like
Yeah.
it's like
But
if
who
you
but
look at
who among us are,
yeah, that's
right?
right.
Right, Ken? I mean, so
All right. Let's roll it. Let's close out with rapid fire. Here we
sure.
go. What's a belief you changed your mind on in the last 2 years?
Oh, I mean, I the biggest one has been I was a more of an AI doomer 6 months ago. I've really changed my tune. I'm much more of an optimist now. I think I wrote a blog post for the company internally around that we gotta go to Mars. Not as in we really have to go to Mars, but we need big thinking, and I think the world will solve some incredibly hard problems now that I didn't appreciate 6 months ago.
Favorite streamed show?
Oh, I probably right now or just ever.
Like, Ev, like, you just like, "Oh, I love that."
I mean, it's hard to argue with Game of Thrones, just the complexity of that show. I think it was an all-time great. You know, but the DVDs of The Wire, I still have. I don't have a DVD player, but I still have the DVDs from The Wire. That was pretty great too. So,
When you're most stuck on a decision, who's the first person you call and why?
These days I call Claude, really as like a thought partner that kind of breaks up the logjam because always available and always very pragmatic, not emotional. Prior to that, some buddies from business school who I think would always kind of help me think through methodically. Guy named Andrew would probably be the first guy, Andrew Ferrer.
What's a daily, weekly habit or weekly habit that quietly makes you better as a CEO?
I'm a huge believer in two things in the morning. One, I read non-related work stuff. So like this morning I was reading like a profile of a Barack Obama in the New Yorker from a couple weeks ago, and like what's Barack Obama doing right now? Or some fiction. I just think reading and staying curious, I think, is really important. And the second is I'm a big walker. I love to like take a morning walk. There's a coffee shop that's like 10 minutes from my house. Walk down there, get a cup of coffee, walk back. It's the best 25 minutes I could spend.
Are you like a 12,000 steps a day guy? I mean, come on, share some stats.
No,
Let us
I don't know
know.
how many steps, but I'm generally a pretty healthy guy. Yeah.
All
But I
right,
like the
last
morning
question.
walk, it just clears the mind.
Last question. If you weren't running, I think I know the answer. Maybe I don't. If you weren't running ThreadUp, what would you be doing?
I'd like to be a professor, probably at like one of the top business schools or undergraduate business programs, talking about leadership and culture and teams.
And with that, we'll land this flight of the retail pilot. James, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ken. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the retail pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.